Well, I had a great science teacher when I was in high school, and he really helped me get my life turned around. He gave me a reason to study. And anything I got interested in, he encouraged me to figure out the scientific basis for it. He taught me how to use the scientific databases. And of course, back in the 60s, when I was doing this, it was work. We didn't even have copying machines back then. You had to go look up a journal article and then write it all down. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of mentor teachers and what they can do. You know, he had a big impact on getting me turned around because I just had no interest in studying until I had the goal of becoming a scientist. And then once I had the goal of becoming a scientist, that gave me a motivation to study. And I think it's really important, you know, a lot of times take a kid's interests and you build on that. You know, autism is a very big spectrum. At one end of the spectrum, you have people that remain nonverbal. The other end of the spectrum, you've got, you know, brilliant minds out in Silicon Valley. Well, my interest in cattle really got started out on my aunt's ranch. And this brings up another really important thing. If you want kids to get interested in stuff, you got to show them interesting stuff. And when I was 15, I went out to my aunt's ranch, and that started all the cattle interest. I mean, things kind of grow. Originally, I wanted to be an experimental psychologist studying optical illusions. And my work with making this optical illusion room when I was in high school actually helped me with some of my cattle work, because some of the first work I ever did with cattle was to get down in the chutes and see the stuff that cattle were afraid of. You know, little reflections, a chain hanging down. Most people never paid any attention to that stuff before. Well, the thing I found when I first started out is selling the equipment ideas was much easier than just selling the idea quiet, gentle cattle handling. A lot of people thought I was really weird, but when I showed them my drawings, they kind of went, "You did that?" And I had a lot of places put in the equipment. And then in the HBO movie, they changed it and messed it up and wrecked it. But other places put equipment in. But getting people to operate those designs correctly, that was a lot harder than getting people just to buy the equipment. I have found in so many things that people will buy the thing rather than do the management. I mean, everybody thought, oh, we put internet in the schools, that's going to fix education. Well, it didn't fix education. It's nice to have internet in the schools, I'm all for that, but it doesn't replace, you know, good teachers. Did a lot of work on, you know, developing, you know, curved cattle handling systems. But I also just worked with people to try to get them to calm down and handle cattle more calmly. And people just think, you know, yelling and screaming, you know, is the right way to do things. And I made the mistake early in my career. I thought I could fix everything with equipment. If I could build a perfect system, everything's going to work perfectly. What I found was I could fix half of things with equipment. The other half is management. And that's why in the last 10 years of my career, I've been working on assessment and auditing systems for animal welfare. I developed a very simple scoring system for slaughter plants where you count how many cattle fell down during handling, how many cattle are mooing and vocalizing during handling. Because when they're mooing and vocalizing and bellowing, they're either hurting or they're upset. And I can count those things. How many cattle they stun correctly. I'm measuring handling. And McDonald's Corporation and other large corporations are using this scoring system. And what that does is it makes people manage the facilities. Because some of the biggest problems that they had caused problems with suffering in a slaughter plant was lack of maintenance of equipment. Well, let's talk about the things I liked. It showed my visual thinking absolutely perfectly. Claire Danes became me in the 60s and the 70s. It showed problems with anxiety and autism. It showed problems with sensory sensitivity, like noise sensitivity, touch sensitivity. It was very clinically accurate. It showed my science teacher really well, and Ann and you know, Carlock, my science teacher. You know, obviously in a movie like that, they've got to change some things around. Well, one part in the graduation scene, I have to say my singing voice is a little better than that. But Claire Danes really did a fantastic job of getting all my mannerisms. I spent time with her. She videotaped that time I spent with her. And then I gave her all these old videotapes so that she could, you know, study that, maybe another 5 or 6 hours worth of stuff. And she just put all that stuff on her iPod and just listened to it constantly so she could sound like me. In fact, you know, I'll be in the airport talking on the phone, and people will come up to me because they recognize my voice, and they recognize my voice from the HBO movie. And I also want to let everybody know it's on DVD now. Well, develop the strengths. One of the things in autism and Asperger's, which is the milder variant, is skills are uneven. I was very good at visual thinking things and art, but I was very bad in math. Couldn't do algebra. Never got a chance to do geometry and trig. That was a gigantic big mistake, because I'm finding a bunch of people that can go right to geometry and trig. Build on the strengths. You know, my ability in art was always encouraged. I think it's a real shame that so many of the schools have taken out the hands-on classes, because those classes were my salvation. Things like art and sewing. I really liked those classes. And then a little later on, I was one of the first girls in our school to say wood shop. You know, I really, liked those kind of classes. Build on strengths. You know, I just, you go out to Silicon Valley and have done some meetings out there in that part of the country, and you see these geeky, nerdy kids, and they're the heads of Silicon Valley. If you watch the Social Network movie about Mark Zuckerberg, he has Asperger. If that movie shows his character accurately, he's Asperger. Well, one of the main things is that kids that have differences, kids that are kind of geeky and nerdy and being teased, if they get the right mentoring, they can really go places and do great things. We've got to build up their strengths. They've also got to learn social skills. And I'm seeing a lot of these smart kids, they're getting too sheltered. They haven't been taught just basic stuff. How do you shop? How do you run a bank account? Just, you know, basic things like that. My mother was always getting me out doing stuff. They've also got to learn work skills. When I was 13 years old, my mother got me a little sewing job. Then later on, I went out to my aunt's ranch. I took care of 9 horses. I built things. I worked in a research lab one summer. You got to get kids out, get them learning work skills. They got to learn things like being on time. Little kids, you got to teach them things like turn taking.